tears, buddy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ful-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. I'm your host, Ash Woolford. Joining me today is a full team. Mozza, how you doing, buddy?
Very excited for the Drew Pettifer show this evening.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? Talking to Drew, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm not quite sure what Mozza means by that because I was not acting weird at all backstage. What anyone says, it's all lies.
Yeah, it's a good job we don't press record before we actually do, is all I'm saying. And AJ, how you doing, mate?
Trying not to burst into tears. You can discern whether or not that's from pure giddiness and hilarical laughter from Drew's antics, or whether or not it's sadness from Fulham's football. You can decide for yourselves, but yeah, trying very hard not to bawl my eyes out live for you all.
I'm trying to start a fire.
It's a wicked fire.
Yeah, let's get into this and actually let's try to break down Monday night's football. So obviously what we're here to do. Fulham, another frustrating loss in the league. I feel like this is the 100th time this season we've had this conversation between us, where we're sat here going all half and no path. You know, between the boxes yesterday, Fulham were great, but as soon as we got to the edge of the opposition's box, just lost all idea, and in our own box weren't that great. It was a really frustrating game of football to watch. It was one of those ones that as soon as we went 1-0 down, you sort of had the inkling that we were probably going to lose the game, which is even more frustrating when you consider we went 1-0 down in the first bloody minute. But let's try and break it down. AJ, I'm going to come to you first, mate. We had a discussion, obviously, in the preview of the game about what we do squad-wise. The squad was pretty much as we expected. There was no real shocks in it for me.
Nope.
Other than the substitutions that will come and we'll talk about in a little while because they're a major talking point in this game. It was just a bit lackluster from the start of the game for us, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can say that. Technically speaking, you could say that their goal came from a counter-attack, so you could argue we were being quite direct very early on in the game to have so many bodies committed so far forward a minute into the match. But at the same time, we just got ripped a hole through us within 60 seconds. So it's kind of is what it is. Oddly enough, despite how much I despise it, Monday Night Football reflected on the goal quite well in that Robinson's done everything right until he falls over, in the sense that he's running back to cover what the pass should have been, which is to play it ahead of the defender and have Semenyo run onto it. Instead, the pass has gone straight at Robinson, who is full sprint running back to get into a covering position, and ultimately just hits him. He loses complete control, falls on his arse, and leaves Semenyo one-on-one essentially with Anderson, and Anderson decides to turn his back and allow him on the inside, which was just poor defending all in all from Anderson, and allows a very clear and easy goal for Bournemouth. So yeah, very lackluster.
I feel like we've had this same conversation about goals we've conceded a lot this season, where we have overcommitted going forward, which you can't really complain about overcommitting in the first minute of the game. You're trying to set your marker, right? And we like to do that. We know we like to do that, and we can't really complain because, you know, Wolves away, that's how we were 1-0 up after a minute, was because we did this as that thing, right? It's one of those things. But what frustrates me, and we'll get to that in a minute, was as soon as we go 1-0 down, we're then in a mindset of, you know, we have to finish a chance. And we do this really weird thing where as soon as we go a goal down, we become so open because we're trying to push forward. We're still trying to play our lovely Marco Silva football, but it leaves us so open defensively when it happens. You know, Drew, we'll moan about players' performances in a little bit. What is it? Is it a mentality thing? What is it that as soon as we go behind in a game, is it just we're trying to push too much to try and get back into it? Why do we always look like when we're behind in a game that we huff and we puff and we just have nothing in us to try sort of get to breach and get that final third bit done, but then also look so open and so vulnerable on the counter attack? What is it?
Oh, mate, I don't want to sound glib, but if I knew that, I'd probably be in the dugout. I can only think that it's got to be there's got to be something psychological. I mean, Silver's made a big thing about changing the mentality so we can compete with the bigger teams, but there's some still fundamental problems. If you look, for example, about our record of teams below us. I mean, it was a big game on Monday night, but Bournemouth hadn't won in 6, and you knew what was going to happen. You just knew what was going to happen. I, I, I don't know. I mean, we gave them a great start, as AJ's already covered. I mean, on paper, it was the same team that put 3 past Liverpool, so you know that they can perform. But I wish I could answer that question. And I know this is a review show, but I genuinely don't know. I genuinely don't know. We just don't seem to react to positive situations. I mean, our bench, we score a lot of goals from our bench, but I don't know. The whole thing just seemed to be what was really disappointing, Ash, is when we went 1-0 down and you looked at how the team reacted, we could have written the script for the rest of the game. We could have written the script. I didn't genuinely think that we looked like we were going to get back into it. There was just something completely lacking, and I just don't know what it was. I don't know what it was. It's very strange.
Well, for me personally, as soon as we went 1-0 down, and we had this discussion in our group chat while the game was going on, that we looked like we were playing in treacle. Like it didn't, like with the ball, without the ball, Bournemouth looked like their players were running normally and naturally, and all of our players looked like they were being weighed down. We've had a couple of opportunities in that first half to maybe get level. You look at probably the best chance is the Muniz one where he breaks free. But again, he looks like he's running in treacle. It's so slow to get ahead of his defender, and then the shot. Well, I was closer to the goal, and I was in Croydon. Like it was shocking. It was a shocking finish from him, but he did everything else correctly, and you're not going to moan so much about it. It's the same with the Ryan Sessegnon header that we'll moan about it later on when we talk about the second half. It just anywhere but directly at the keeper, and he might have a chance of scoring. It was a bit of a weak header as well, but he's not really known for his heading, so that is what that is. But what was most concerning for me in that first half wasn't even our lack of firepower. It was the fact that Bournemouth looked like they were going to score every single time they went forward, and they had me panicked every single time they went forward. They hit the bar once, obviously, but they've done that thing that we've all known for a long time. It's very easy to play Fulham in a game of football because all you have to do is get a goal ahead and then make the pitch tight, block the edge of your box off, and then wait for us to do something. And it was really frustrating watching that first half where we just, especially the last 20 minutes of it, we were completely in charge of that half, but didn't look like we were going to create anything. And then obviously there's the big talking point at the end of the first half where, Bournemouth probably should have had a player sent off. Like it's a weird one. Like I watching it first time thought there wasn't really much malice in it, but then the more replays I see of it, the worse the tackle looks. Like it's above ankle height, studs up, and he makes contact with the player. Any other club, that's a red card. That's now 2 weeks in a row where there has been clear, foul play in a game, and it's not even well, it was looked at, but they've just sort of cleared it super quickly and gone through it. It's really frustrating. Mozza, you know, before we even start talking about the second half, going into halftime 1-0 down, what was your feeling? How frustrated were you just with what you were watching, and sort of did you feel that we were going to be able to come out of it at any point in the second half?
No. From the moment we conceded, which was 53 seconds, as we said, I felt like I gave up, but I think I sensed that because it just seemed like the whole team gave up. And I'm usually like a bit more optimistic, but I just felt completely flat and depressed. And I never leave games early, and I don't turn off games. But I came very close to doing so last night, and on our group chat behind the scenes, I said it's the worst performance I've seen from us this season. Feel free to argue or whatnot. It's not hyperbole from me saying that just because we've gone 1-0 down that early. There was just absolutely nothing from me, and it was the one thing we didn't want to happen, which we talked about in our preview show. I think I said, or we all kind of agreed off the back of the Liverpool win, even if we lose to Bournemouth, let's lose with some dignity. And I feel like I've tempted fate by what I said, because I felt embarrassed. I felt embarrassed and I felt sick last night watching that. And I can't remember the last time I have felt that way watching us play. Yeah, I mean, I've got an awful lot to say, but I can save it for a bit later on when we talk about the second half. But just a lack of quality, a lack of desire. And
yeah, it was really frustrating, right? I mean, let's get into the second half, right? Because I don't know what happened in that Fulham changing room at half time, but I was expecting us to come out with a little bit more impetus, a little bit more, riled up and ready to go. But the first 15 minutes of that second half were so bad. Like the amount of misplaced passes, the amount of times Anthony Robinson just wasn't paying attention when the ball was coming towards him and it just goes out of play. There was 4 or 5 absolute hospital passes towards him as well. I'm not going to blame him for all of them, but there was at least 3 occasions in the first 10 minutes of that second half where very easy passes have gone out to him, and it's like he's thinking 3 moves ahead of where he should be, and he hasn't done the thing he's actually meant to do, which is trap the ball in front of him. It happened 3 times in the opening 10 minutes of that half. It's not that shocking to me that when the subs come along, he was actually meant to be one of the subs that come off, and we'll talk about that farce in a second. But the first 15 minutes of that second half, AJ, how frustrating were they to watch? Because it looked like we hadn't been training in 8 days, let alone like been preparing for the game. It was so poor. You're on mute.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I was disappointed in the game as a whole, but ironically, I thought we created slightly more than we normally do in those situations where players sit in their own half and defend their own box. Maybe we created slightly more because that's not Bournemouth's normal way of playing, and they were going against what they normally would do in order to upset us, which worked perfectly, to be fair to them. But we still managed 7 shots on target over the course of the match, which is actually surprisingly high for us when we're playing against a team that have shut up shop. But as for those first 15 minutes, I don't really discern it from the rest of the second half. Misplaced passes, trying to drill quarterback passes from our centre-back position along a short diagonal instead of the long diagonal and playing it straight out of play. Robinson constantly being ahead of wherever the ball's being played. The substitutions, as you said, we'll get onto in a minute. But then later on, ESR coming on, and even Kearney coming on and playing sideways passes. I think ESR actually played more forward passes than Kearney did in some of that game, which was a shock to me. Because normally Kearney's the type of guy that will play a quick 1-2 and then look to play an immediate pass forward. So everything about that second half was equally just distraught for me. There's no 15 minutes of shite and then it picked up. It was 45 minutes of shite.
Yeah, interesting. I was mainly going off the 15 minutes before we get to the bit that we want to talk about. And Drew, I'm coming to you on this one.
Great.
What the fuck happened at that substitution? Like, what was going on? Like, I've got. Before we talk about it, right? I'm just gonna get the conversation between Jack Kelly, who is a Fulham fan reporter, and Marco Silva after the game when he was asked what exactly happened. And Marco Silva said the fourth official got confused with the numbers and they decided not to let us change it. The real issue was a lack of communication from the fourth official and our staff. They confused Ryan, Sessegnon, and Robinson. We had enough time to correct it. I tried to correct it. They saw it was a mistake. They decided to let us correct it and then change their mind after a few seconds, which is what caused all of the confusion on the sideline. So what it looks like is that Ryan Sessegnon wasn't even meant to be coming off at all. It looks like Anthony Robinson was meant to be coming off. A substitution at the time was probably merited considering how he played in the game. It was just a fucking mess, mate. Like what do you even say about it really, other than that it sort of describes how the game went? It's mental.
You basically just summed it up. I mean, it was it was the game in a microcosm. I mean, Ryan Sessegnon looked completely bemused by the whole thing. At one point, and unless my memory's playing tricks on me, it looked like Silva was trying to push him back onto the field. I mean, it was just completely nonsensical. I understand totally why he was going to take Robinson off. Robinson has been one of the standout players of the season, but for reasons that we've already ventilated, it wasn't a good game for Robinson. The fact that we were putting Sessegnon back there again shows problems with our lack of depth, because Sess is essentially an emergency left back. But this seems to keep happening to us, and there's no explanation. You get these decisions, and we'll get Keith Hackett come out again and say, oh, well, you know, the refereeing and the assistant referees got it all wrong. But we keep getting these situations. I just don't understand it. Why the... I mean, we do substitutions all the time in every game. Yeah, I cannot... And I was saying to you boys backstage, I cannot recall such a, for want of a better phrase, clusterfuck of a situation when miscommunicating or misidentifying which player should come on and which player should come off. I mean, it was amateur hour is what it was. We should never have been in that situation anyway. I mean, it has to start with us. I don't understand how you can... how the initial mistake was made. I don't have the vocabulary to actually express my complete befuddlement of the whole situation. You looked at it, okay, and the thing about it was, as you've already said, Ash, it was so in keeping with the whole game. It was so in keeping with the whole game. I mean, it was just, I would call it a comedy of errors, but it wasn't funny. It was just for a professional football club. Yeah, it just looked amateurish. It really did. It really did. And you could tell from the substitutes themselves, like I've said about Ryan, they clearly didn't understand what was going on. I mean, how you can make such an obvious error, bearing in mind how many games we played this season, how many substitutions we made, I do not know. I do not know. I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't funny. It was just pathetic. And it was, I mean, I looked at it and I just, like you said, it was in keeping with the whole game. The whole thing was just such a massive anticlimax. And you know, we'll get on to man of the match and all that. But for the Fulham faithful that travelled there, who didn't have the benefit of the commentary, they must have been wondering what the hell was going on and why the hell they bothered travelling all the way down the M3, because it was just nonsense. It was just nonsense. It was pathetic, is what it was.
The thing for me, right, if we were winning the game, you'd think it was an absolute genius bit of time wasted. But it's just ridiculous.
We're not that
What's
smart.
so
Ash.
ridiculous about it is we made a no, we're not. Look, we made a triple substitution, and that whole thing took so much time and so much confusion that Tom Kearney, who came on as part of that triple substitution, according to the actual minutes of the game, came on 2 minutes after Adama Traore, and they were substitutes at the same time. It's absolute madness how much that was messed up. What's upsetting again is that for once it looked like Marco Silva. If the substitute had happened now, it would have been, Robertson coming off. We would have seen Marco Silva do something that we've often moaned about him not doing, which is actually making a change that might have changed formation a little bit and changed our shape a little bit, but turned out to be light for light subs. Unfortunately, none of those subs worked. Tom Kearney came on, who, let's be honest, as much as his legs may be going, we can usually rely on his passing. They were shot. His passing was well off it for the first 10 minutes he was on the pitch yesterday. That whole second half was just an embarrassment of mistakes and self-sabotage, and everything that we could do wrong, we was doing wrong. We looked scared to shoot, and the ironic thing is, the three most dangerous parts of that second half from us attacking wise was when we weren't afraid to shoot and we actually got a couple of shots off. The only unfortunate thing is just that we were, every shot we had just literally fell into Kepa's hands. It was just not good enough going forward, and that's a real problem for me. And when we sit back at the end of this season, if we don't get Europe at the end of this season, and we have to highlight a reason why, it will be because we've had this conversation on this show about 30 times this season, where we are really concerned about the lack of imagination when we get near the edge of the box. And it's often why, and AJ is probably the prime example of this, has been calling out for seeing Josh King and Goddo getting more minutes, because when those players come on, they actually they might be able to create something and take the game by the scruff of the neck. Look, one of the substitutions that was made yesterday was ESR coming on. Now, we all know, I don't want to bash him too much. Anyone who follows me on Twitter would have seen that, I've made a few comments about ESR today, and, a couple of people are confused that as hate towards him, but it's not. It's more just disappointment and frustration that for a £30 million player, when you're coming on in games like this, you need to be able to make changes to the game in the game. You need to be able to take the game by the scruff of the neck, and nothing changed. And I wasn't joking when I said last night, when I tweeted that ESR on, TV off. I wasn't joking. I turned the football off because I knew nothing was going to change as soon as I saw him warming up. It's really frustrating that, Mozza, you tend to try to be quite positive, right? You tend not to mark players out for criticism too much, right? But it is really frustrating that we have a player that's cost this much money. And I know there's this whole argument about, he needs time and an arm around him and stuff like that. But £30 million coming on a game like this, you've got to be able to do something. And as well as his passing looked when he came on, he didn't really offer much. But he weren't even the worst defender last night. But it's just really frustrating, right?
What can I say that we haven't said before about him? So I'm not going to sit here and slag him off. It feels like it's punching down, really. I hope he sorts himself out before next season. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the problem is, but it is, again, I said I was embarrassed earlier. I'm embarrassed the amount of times he's come on the pitch, whether it be as an impact sub, which he's not, which we talked about in the preview, whether he started. I'm embarrassed that he's been paraded as this club record signing. He must have a fucking good agent. I don't know. I'm at a loss. We're all at a loss with ESR. But his performance was it just paralleled pretty much everyone on the pitch. So yeah, that's what I'll say about ESR. And I'll try not to ramble, but I touched on a lack of quality and a lack of desire last night. We've used words like we weren't professional, phrases like comedy of errors. It's easy to say last night was like watching the Sunday League. I know that's not an original criticism. I don't even know if it was that good from us. I don't understand the football that we were playing. And it's not just this game. We've done it a lot. There's a lot of back passing all the time. So I'm looking at my notes. I've got a whole list of things to say. So I'm trying to pick like the one that's frustrated me the most, which we keep doing, right? A bit of a rhetorical question. When a keeper has the ball, say Leno's got the ball, and they do a short goal kick, or they do a short ball, right? Why do we do that? Or why does any keeper, any team do that? In a nutshell, tell me why.
Well, it's football now, mate. It's keep ball in it. It's all about possession.
That's it. So you keep possession, right? The amount of times that happened last night, and in many games we've played this season, we do a short ball, only to fuck around with it at the back between the defenders, wait for the opposition to press us, panic, and we've actually conceded once like this. I can't remember what the game was. Last night, that exact thing happened where there was panic between the defenders. Leno managed to get it to Bassi, and Bassi just fucking booted it up the other end of the pitch, and then a Bournemouth player got it. What the fuck is that all about? What is going on? Has Silva told them to do this? If he has, what's the logic behind it? It is mental. I can't piece it together unless any of you can. As I say, it's a bit of a rhetorical question. That's the thing that's been frustrating me the most. The amount of back passing, we build it. There's no one's creating spaces, chances up top. So we pass it back and we pass it back. Sometimes you have got to do that. I appreciate that. But then it just fucks up. So
yeah, well, look. Last night was one of those games. No. Last night was one of those games, right? That it's very easy to play Fulham sometimes. All you have to do is go 1-0 up and then mark the edge of your box very, very well, because we do this thing where we, as I said earlier on in the show, we're excellent between the two boxes. But as soon as we get to the edge of the opposition's box, we just completely run out of clues and we run out of ideas. And the frustrating thing is the best player for us as our squad to dealing with this is Harry Wilson, who obviously is coming back from injury. Would have been nice to maybe have seen him last night, but maybe it's just a bit too soon with the injury, right? But we saw it way too many times last night where we loads of lovely passing, get the ball out wide to Anthony Robertson. Anthony Robertson realises it's too tight, he can't get a cross in. So he does one or two things. He either puts in a proper powder puff cross into the box, which is going towards nobody, aimed at nobody, no power behind it, no conviction behind it, easily defended, or he passes backwards and we recycle and we do the same thing again. This is when we get frustrated with Fulham, right? And all of us will probably agree with this. It's just that, as soon as you start, if you see that pattern of play happen continuously, you want somebody on the pitch to wake up and be wise of it and go, right, we need to change tactics a little bit. Maybe have a few pop shots from distance, maybe have a few more, a few more variations in what we're doing. But we don't, and we didn't. And that was the problem, that we spent 45 minutes in that second half getting the ball out to Robinson, who put a rubbish cross in, and then nothing happened. And everybody else around him was too scared to have a shot or do anything with it. It is really frustrating to watch, but this is how Fulham plays sometimes. And this is the reason why we are the most inconsistent team in the league. And, it is one of those things that, until we manage to get some actual quality on the pitch and players that are willing to just be that level, that difference maker, and just try something imaginative, that won't change. And it's beyond frustrating. Look, guys, before we talk about sort of man of the match and stuff, does any of you three have anything else you want to add about the game before we sort of discuss man of the match and where we go from here?
I mean, the only thing I say, and this is a recurrent theme, Marco likes working with what he calls a smaller squad. But I don't think it's ability. There's got to be. It comes down to desire and attitude, and I just think he needs to be braver, and he just needs to change it up more. We've been saying this for some time, but when it's obviously not working, I mean, you could have predicted how we'd go against Bournemouth because we flat out to deceive, and any team that's below us causes us significant problems. And I, like I say, I still maintain that Silva is Fulham's biggest asset, but I do sometimes wish he was more in tune with the squad and where they are mentally, because he is very loyal, but sometimes I do feel that there are players in there that almost pick themselves. Robinson, Iwobi, ESR up to a point, but now we're back to Pereira, and I'm not singling out Pereira as being particularly bad, but I'm just saying, like you said, Ash, I mean, I would be more than happy to start seeing King play more. I'd be more than happy to start seeing Goddo play. But Silver's not going to change. But that squad needs freshening up, and we will get to this in a future show when it comes to the off season. But it's going to be very, very telling the direction Fulham are going to take this off season in terms of the squad, because I don't think anyone that watches Fulham closely thinks that anything other than anywhere between, I'd say, 5 and 7 new signings are going to be sufficient if we are serious about making a consistent run at the, say, top 8 of the table. But anyway, that's all I was going to finish on. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fine. Look, it is one of those things that we've got a massive game this weekend that we have to get ourselves back up for. We'll talk about that later on in the week when we come to preview, the SW6 derby. Looking to do a double over Chelsea. The good news is if we keep up our consistent inconsistency, we'll be world class on Sunday. So there's that good thing. Let's just finish with this one. It's really hard to have many players worthy of mention and man of the match shouts, but I feel like we've been really negative in this episode. So let's try to pick out some positives if we can. Look, AJ, starting with you, mate. Have you got a man of the match? Have you got any honourable mentions? At least something to pick out from that we can be a little bit positive about going into the Chelsea game on the weekend.
Ryan Sessegnon looks sharp again. Getting in behind the lines, creating opportunities, taking players on. He seems to be our most direct player, which is saying something. But yeah, I think he's the only one I can really give any credit towards during that game. Nunez, to some degree as well, had some direct play about him in that first half. Petered out in the second, but he was lively for about 15-20 minutes of the first half. Yeah, outside of that, I haven't really got anyone else I can sort of shoehorn in. Even the midfield was lacking compared to its usual standards.
Yeah, it was a little bit frustrating. How about you, Mozza? Have you got any players that you want to give at least a little bit of praise for in terms of putting effort in the game?
Yeah, I thought Cess as well. I actually thought Berge. That's it. I'm not even going to choose a player of the match because I just can't. I know we want to be positive, but yeah, sorry. That's where I'm at. No one deserves it, in my opinion.
No, that's a fair shout, mate. It's a fair shout. Drew, what about yourself, mate?
I thought Cess was probably our best attacking outlet. Bassey, I suppose, was reasonably solid, but Leno was okay, but it was really much for muchness. There was no one, I mean, I wouldn't say anyone was horrific, but it was all people dropping 4 and 5s out of 10. It was that sort of nothing performance. Do you know what I mean? I mean, fair play to the Fulham fans that went, because you could really hear them singing. I mean, they were great. But yeah, I mean, if I was going to give it to anyone, for the time he was on the field, I'd probably give it to Cesc, because at least he looked like he had some passion about him. And, he does seem to value his place in the team, bearing in mind his recent history and what he's had to come back from. But that hunger and that attitude and that energy we sorely lack elsewhere, which goes back to the point I was making earlier. I think it's, I'd like to see some of the youngsters in just for, freshening things up. But yeah, I'll give it Cesc for me.
Yeah, it's one of those ones, really. Look, I know that there's been a lot of negativity around a lot of the performances last night. I think the only real positive that we can say is that everyone dropped a stinker. So it's not like we're sitting here berating one player for, ruining the game for us. It was one of those performances where there was a lot of huff and there was a lot of puff, but there was no houses being blown down last night, and it is as simple as that, wasn't it? Like there was a lot of effort put in, but ultimately no quality, and that's an issue, and it's a problem that we spoke about a few too many times this season. But it is what it is, and if we don't make Europe, it'll be one of the major reasons why that we've had this conversation, and we've come out of games like that, and it is what it is. That lads, again, we're saying this awful lot lately. It's not an easy one to review. Performances like that are really frustrating, and they're not hard. They're not hard to be angry about, and we do try not to be sort of super negative. But when you're seeing some of the levels that we saw last night, its frustrations are clear, and it is what it is. We got a big one coming up this weekend. Obviously, Chelsea at home in the SW6 derby, looking to do the double over them, which would be amazing. We'll obviously have a review out for that one before the weekend, preview for that one before the weekend. Other than that, hopefully Fulham haven't ruined everyone's weeks. We usually moan about them ruining everyone's weekends, but we'll start and try to be positive for that one. Lads, thanks very much for joining me on this one. Thanks everyone for coming and watching us. Please do share, like, and subscribe. We're so close to that 100 subscribers now. It would be really nice to sort of hit that in the next couple of weeks, if possible. Other than that, have a good week, and come on, you whites.